Welcome in to the 48 Minutes Podcast on Believe, presented by Bet Online. I'm Ross Geiger, the former NBA video coordinator, and I'm joined alongside Bruce Bernstein, our four-time Emmy Award winner, who spent more than 3 decades at ESPN producing NBA shows, SportsCenter, and soaking up knowledge from the best hoop analysts in the business. Also joining us is the 2-time Emmy Award winner, Michael Worldby Freer, who is a senior writer at StatFactor, specializing in writing advanced statistical NBA reports for various announcers across the league. And returning to the show here tonight is special guest Steve Bulpett from Heavy.com. This is episode number 130, the Kenny the Jet Smith episode, as the 2-time champion and legendary member of Inside the NBA on TNT wore number 30 for 8 of his 9 seasons in the NBA. Before we get things rolling here tonight, just a quick reminder, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selections of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA, head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Bruce, take it away.
All right. As you briefly mentioned at the top, Ross, this week's special guest is making his 3rd appearance on the show. He first appeared in March of 23, then again in May of 24. He's the one and only Steve Bulpett of Heavy.com, who was the Celtics beat writer beginning with, I believe, Bob Cousy's 2nd season back in the 50s. Oh, no. He was there for a really long time. I know everyone thinks they're funny. He hasn't been there for that long, but he was there for a really long time. He's one of the greatest Greek natives of Massachusetts, trailing only his hero, the Golden Greek, the late great Harry Aganis. Now, Steve, my pal Russ Geiger, above you to the right on the screen, actually attended Giannis Antetokounmpo's wedding earlier in the fall, and I think he had something he wanted to ask you about the whole tradition of Greek weddings.
Yeah, it was a smashing success in Greece for the Greek Freak's wedding, but wasn't expecting all the plates being smashed out on the dance floor. We had about 1,000 smashed in total. I probably should have talked to you before this. Is this like a tradition at every Greek wedding? I just wasn't accustomed to it.
I think they were just mad at you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I'm sure the wedding itself, the ceremony lasted a long time.
Yes.
Greek weddings last longer than some marriages.
Well, hopefully that's not the case for my guy Giannis.
Well, no, I mean, it does not longer than a Greek marriage, because that's once you're there, you're locked in. But no, I'm sure it was a great time. I've been to a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a new world for me, and boy, was it a lot of fun seeing Giannis, Brooke Lopez, Robin Lopez, Bobby Portis, you name it, they're all smashing plates, and so I was just kind of soaking it all in. But definitely had to get that in, and it's great to have you back on the show, Steve. Thanks for joining us. We certainly appreciate your time and support of our show. So just thought we'd start things off discussing the Cleveland Cavaliers. They remain undefeated on the season at 11-0. This is a team that brought back the same roster as last season, but they do have a new coach. So my question to you is, what is Kenny Atkinson doing that maybe JB Bickerstaff wasn't? Or is this just a case of a young group that's been maturing together?
Well, first of all, I want to state for the record that I was the Greek Freak called that before Giannis was born, as another person explained to him one night. Anyway, the Cleveland thing is interesting. They needed a coaching change. There were people there, and I'm not even sure if it's for good reason or not, but there were people that were not on JB Bickerstaff's side. So there was a change that was going to happen. And in those situations, it's the players always come out and play better, which isn't to say that they weren't going to anyway, because, another year with the same group, I think they were bound to get better. And I think they proved something to themselves as a group last year. But as we saw in Boston, when Bill Fitch was let go and Casey Jones came in, there was an immediate uptick. Whenever a coach gets let go like that, I think the player's instinct is, well, if we start winning now, then it's going to be everything that was wrong before, even the stuff that was our fault, is going to look like it was his fault. So, but again, I don't want to take away from the fact that that's a good basketball team with good players that was bound to take a step forward anyway this year.
Right.
Now, Steve, I'm circling next Tuesday, November 19th, when the Cavaliers make their first trip to Boston. It's entirely possible they could be 15-0 when they get there. So we'll keep our eye out. When we do this show next week, I'm sure we'll be looking ahead to that game a little bit. But okay.
And if they, as soon as they lose their first game, Mercury Morris in heaven will be drinking some champagne, once they're not undefeated any longer.
Yeah, and Nick Bonaconte as well. All right, so we talked about JB Bickerstaff a moment ago. One of my preseason thoughts was to buy Pistons stock. He comes over from Cleveland. He's doing a really good job with a talented but young team. They did add a few veteran guys, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., to go with the young studs like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. They're going to definitely improve on last year's 14-68 record. I don't think there's any question about that. And our buddy Jared Greenberg of TNT likes to say, it's easier to go from bad to good than from good to great. So given what the Cavs are doing without JB, kind of going from good to great, and the Pistons are doing with JB going from bad to good, in your opinion, is he a coach that is better at developing young guys rather than winning with an older team?
That's possible, but I'm not sure we can, that to state that definitively would be to rely on circumstantial evidence. And I'm not really sure it holds up. I do not vote for any NBA awards. I chose not to several years ago because I think it's unethical. That aside, I always thought that the Coach of the Year award was really kind of screwed up the way it got handed out, because it usually went to a guy who took a team that was not good and made it mediocre of sorts, and it's like, I think it's harder to win when there's expectations. It's harder to win when there's different circumstances, like you're playing through injuries and you have to develop guys to fill roles. But back to your question, I remember talking to Monty Williams last year, just having a private chat and saying, that team had lost a bunch of close games and they just weren't getting the results that the run of play would have kind of dictated usually that they would get. And what I said was, it's once this team gets a little bit of the results, once they start to grab a few wins, then all of a sudden they'll realize just how close they are to being good. And they'll all of a sudden will be paying more attention to defense and to little things. And they won't be slumping their shoulders. They won't be hanging their heads when something bad goes against them and, expecting the next bad thing to happen. So, I think that team was going to make a jump anyway. And I'm kind of surprised that they did what they did with the coaching maneuver. But I guess the bottom line is your point may be well taken. But I do believe that team was ready to take a step to, see what they could become with a few more wins. And, when you're not winning, every player, by the time he goes from after a loss, by the time a player goes from the court to the dressing room and picks up their phone, they've got a handful of people who've told them it wasn't their fault and who else's fault it was. And you start to think about, well, yeah, I'm new in the league here. I need to establish myself. And the thoughts become a little individualized. But all of a sudden, a couple of wins, and you start achieving things as a group. And I'm not saying you weren't trying hard on defense before, but maybe there's a little more attention paid at the boarding shoot around when they're going over matchups and how you want to scheme against certain things an opponent runs. There's more pride taken in defense and in little things. So I would go there. But Bickerstaff may be the right guy for this group.
Now, Steve, what are your thoughts on the Knicks after 9 games here? They came in with a lot of hype. They're under 500 entering Monday after 9 games. They got really ran out of the gym there in the fourth quarter on Sunday against the Pacers. And there's been a lot of talk already about Tibbs working a lot of guys, but he doesn't have much of a rotation right now because of injuries or whatever. Is it something as simple as that, or is there, from what you've seen or read, is there anything wrong with this lineup as it stands right now, at least among the core?
Oh, well, before the year, I wrote that's the issue with them, is that even when the team is full, they're going to have some depth issues. And depth issues for a Tom Thibodeau team, a guy who does lean on his starters a lot, that was going to be a problem. Now, if this team can get to – I also wrote that if this team can get to the playoffs whole, I had NBA people telling me that this could be a group that would match up well against Boston if it becomes a possession for possession game, that kind of thing. They could be a really good challenge for Boston. But again, I guess to your point, Thibodeau does lean on his starters a lot. And a guy like Jalen Brunson wants to play 50 minutes in a 48-minute game. And it's great to have those kind of guys, but sometimes you have to be saved from yourself. So, I guess keep an eye on those minutes, but also, the depth thing can be a problem because, your guys have got to come out of the game at some point. And, a team like Boston, they're going to keep their foot on the gas with the guys they've got. They're going to keep firing up threes and they're going to run you. And particularly if your bench people haven't played as much in that game, then they're not, are they going to be in rhythm as much? So before the year started, especially after the deals they made, like depth was going to be an issue, and that did not play well in set against Tom Thibodeau's history. Now, will things change as the year goes on? Will he develop more trust in more guys? Will he curtail the minutes of some regulars to keep them fresher, and also get more out of his bench? We'll see.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, see, about the starters, how Tibbs likes to play them. Coming into Monday, that starting lineup for the Knicks had played more minutes than any other 5-player lineup in the league in 9 games. So they're already number one in that regard.
But I mean, hey, look, what did these guys play a few times a week, but we know how that works. And it's not just that you're going to be dragging your starters, but are you giving your bench guys enough time? The Celtics had this issue a few years ago. They would have these nice shooters they would bring in, young guys, but they wouldn't give them enough minutes and enough touches. And shooters have to have touches. Whether it's shot or not, they've got to get the ball in their hands. And you can't run five trips down the floor. A guy doesn't touch the ball, and then he runs corner. You give it to him, and it's an open three. Now you got to take it. That's hard to do. You need to be in the flow. And so again, maybe it's not as much, or maybe just some, that he's hurting his starters, but also that he's not helping the bench such as it is there.
I think the Knicks are going to be okay, but I mean, it's easy to forget that when they made the deal for Karl Anthony Towns, it was relatively far into training camp. So I think a lot of what their issues are still kind of getting comfortable with each other on the floor. But you mentioned the depth. And I mean, look, last year, Hartenstein and DiVincenzo were great pieces for them off the bench. They're both gone now. So it remains to be seen who's going to step up there. But one guy coming off the bench for Boston has been ridiculous so far this season. Obviously, teams hasn't played super great, but they managed to win just about every night. But Payton Prichard has really stood out. And in watching his game, I used to kind of compare him to TJ McConnell because of his kind of overall vibe of his game. But I think now it's almost more like he's TJ McConnell on defense and Vinny Microwave Johnson on offense. I mean, what are your thoughts on the evolution of that guy?
I remember a few years ago, I guess a bunch of years ago now, that the Celtics had this guy, the brain doctor, that would do brain typing.
Mm-hmm.
He's a friend of Ainge's or someone that Ainge knew.
Yep.
And Danny liked to keep, certain characters around the team. And the guy said that Larry had, the letters are probably wrong, but I know there's like an ENTP type of brain or whatever, different types. The letters are wrong, I'm sure. But
I think it was LGBT. No, I'm just kidding.
That guy said that Larry Bird was had the same brain type as like a serial killer or something like that.
Wow.
And and I think in a basketball sense, I think Payton Prichard is kind of a sociopath. He is a lunatic as far as working out. I wrote a thing about him, or a note last year. A guy who now works in the NBA with another team, but he was working on a college staff years ago, and he went to try to recruit Payton Prichard, and said it was the most ridiculous and best 6:30 a.m. workout he'd ever seen in his life. So for a guy like this to come in he comes off the bench, he wakes up in the morning with ridiculous confidence. Now I'm sure it's earned confidence because I know he's working out, he's getting up tons of shots all the time. But to have that kind of confidence buys you an extra half second to get off your shot, when at his size, he otherwise wouldn't be able to get it off. It allows him. One difference between Payton Prichard and TJ McConnell is that, both will drive to the basket, but McConnell won't shoot.
Yep.
Payton Prichard will go in there, give some 7.5-footer, 2 head fakes, and go up anyway, with an FU kind of shot. That's the way he's programmed. So you get the benefit for your team of not only what he produces, sheer numbers wise, but you go to your bench, you're taking some of your better players out of the game, and you put this guy in, and he assures that you're gonna keep tempo and probably even raise your tempo some. And when you're playing against other team subs, that I think is huge.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Steve. And you mentioned how crazy Payton Prichard is, especially with his workouts and how focused he is in those. Do you think he's crazy enough? Does he focus on making sure to practice some half-court heaves? Do you think that's part of his repertoire on the practice court?
I think he gets up 5 before he goes to bed at night. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm sure he practices some, but what's his shooting range when he gets off the bus, as far as he's concerned?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm in my zone. Give me the ball.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's the kind of, I did a story I keep saying I did a story. Damn it, read my shit.
Heavy.com, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Heavy.com.
But there's one story that gets passed around with a lot of youth teams and high school teams, because I keep getting messages, emails back. And I'll try to do the story quickly. I know we only have about 3 hours here. But a few years ago, I was Warriors were in town. I went over to their practice on an off day to do a story on Steph Curry. And, gotten to know him over the years. Practice finishes, can you talk to me later? No problem. But he's out there shooting. We talked to the coach. We talked to a couple other people. And he's out there going, Bruce Frazier's feeding him, the assistant coach. And he's going 5, 5, 5, 5, and 5 around the arc. Back and forth, back and forth. He finishes. How you doing? We do some trash talk, Dayton versus Davidson. Go Flyers. And we finish up and say, hey, thanks for your time. Good to see you. Good to see you. I'll see you tomorrow night. And I go, by the way, how many shots did you just get up? I think the answer at that time was 250. Now, they'd flown in from Indianapolis. This is perhaps the greatest shooter the game has ever known. He didn't forget how to shoot on the flight from Indianapolis to Boston. He didn't travel through some Bermuda Triangle thing that erased his brain. So when I'm talking to, high school guys or even my college team I spoke to, I said, look, if this is what he's doing, if this is what the greatest shooter ever is doing after practice, what do you need to do? Mm-hmm. And, it's a thing, it's earned confidence. Great players don't just make shots at the end of the game because they're talented. They make shots because they believe in their mind and their soul. Damn it, I've earned the right to make this shot. We're down by 2. I'm going to pull up for a 3 with a second and a half on the clock. I've earned the right to make this shot. And that's confident. And I think there's a karma thing there as well, where if you haven't put in the work, you haven't. And I think that kind of sticks in your brain as well and can cause your elbow to get a little stiff.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of confidence and sticking to this Boston Celtics bench, I wanted to talk a little bit about Neemia Queta because he's done a tremendous job for Boston with Luke Cornett and even Xavier Tillman's roles kind of being affected by his play. So how important of a piece do you think a guy like Queta could be once Kristaps Porzingis returns?
What Queta's good at, and I saw it a couple games ago where he came in and all of a sudden he just decided, I'm going beast mode. Mm-hmm. And he was throwing his body around and it worked. And you could almost see him lighting up like, hey, my stuff works here. It doesn't just work in the G League. I can bully people here too. And, a little bit last game, not as much, but, that's the kind of thing he can do. And it's not just what he can do in terms of physically, I'm here, I'm in the proper position, but it's also the kind of thoughts he puts into an opponent's head. Yeah. Like, I'm going to drive to the basket now. Subconsciously, they're thinking, have my insurance premiums all been paid up? Do I have a next of kin, an emergency? But that's the kind of thing. Partly it's because he's big and he's strong and he knows what to do, and partly it's because he doesn't know what to do entirely. Yeah. And it's like his body could just wind up in the wrong place. And was it? Larry Nance Jr. one time went into the Cavs locker room, I believe I think he was still with the Cavs. And he was saying, can we use bad language here, by the way?
Yes. And
he was like, fuck Aaron Baines. Fuck Aaron Baines. I go, Larry, what happened? What's up? He goes, well, he's so big and he just hits you and it's so hard. And he's such a nice guy and he'll apologize. And it's like, and he didn't mean it, but he's just that big. So I think there's a little measure of that, like Nuke Lelouch, could be at your head.
Yeah, it's a nice new dimension for the Celtics. He brings a different perspective to that core.
Agreed.
Hey, Steve, taking the conversation out west here, we got the Golden State Warriors are looking like they're wanting to make one more serious run at this grand prize here. And one of the guys that they picked up, Buddy Hield, is putting on a show like we've seen from him in the past, but really not like this and not that expected. Is it? I know you're not a big awards guy or whatever, but is it even possible for a guy at age 31 to somehow come away with the Most Improved Player award?
I suppose. Look, you guys have been on the game long enough to know that any player, and people will always judge players because there's a vacuum that needs to be filled, but you have to judge everyone in context, right? And all of a sudden, this is the context he's in, getting to play next to Steph Curry, play next to floor spreaders, that changes things. I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, if he's your best player, probably not a good team, probably not a great team anyway. But if he's your third or fourth option on offense, you got a pretty good team.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, getting to play more in space, getting to play with, the right situation, guys around him that are, he's not trying to lift up guys so much as he's just, this is your role. Come in and fire it up, bub. So there's a certain freeing aspect about that.
Yeah, it's funny because coming into the season, I was not really expecting a whole lot out of the Warriors. I'll be honest. I mean, I saw them as probably a play-in level team. But as World B mentioned, they have one of the best records in the league. They beat OKC on Sunday. I mean, and Holmgren got hurt, which we'll talk a little about that later. But is this Warriors team, in your opinion, do they have what it takes to make a serious run at one more chip?
Yeah, I think that as much as I like Klay Thompson, I think having that issue cleared up was good, because Klay came back, and what was explained to me was, he was trying to prove that he was back, and he was fighting what he is now versus the expectation versus what he was, etc. And I think that, there was some residual of, they were trying to hang on to what they used to be as a group even. But now it's, they have obviously two of the, key pieces, but it's kind of a new group. It's a new thing, a new conglomeration, a new recipe. So I think that's working for them so well. I think as far as your specific question, can they do something out west? There are some teams that aren't as good as they were before, perhaps. And there are teams that aren't exactly complete in some ways anyway. So, Dallas defensively, are they there? The changes that Denver made last year, not realizing the effect that losing a guy like Bruce Brown would have on them, those kind of things that really, you need to have around your star players. Bunch of questions like that. Yeah, they could be in the mix, but things have to go right for them too. They have to stay healthy. They're older guys. Their AARP crew has to stay healthy. But I think they're living a little freer under without so much expectation on their shoulders now. They're just out playing basketball.
Yeah, they certainly are playing some ball there, and so far so good for the Golden State Warriors. We're going to take a quick break, Steve, but when we come back, we're going to talk about so far so bad right after this. And we're back here on 48 Minutes, and Steve, obviously at the top we talked about Giannis a little bit, so I think you have a feeling who my team is. And so we're going to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that couldn't close the deal over Boston at home on Sunday despite leading by 17 points in that one at one point. And they've now dropped to 2-8 on the season. And given the fact that Bruce has let me know that Doc Rivers quite well, what types of moves do you think he should consider as he tries to turn this season around for the team?
Well, I'm just going to find the something I tweeted out yesterday. I'll just basically it's like people focus on their 2-8 start, but I think that team, their troubles go back to when they traded Drew Holiday and got Lillard back.
Yeah.
And then I think truly they were removed from contention 4 days later when Portland traded Holiday to Boston. Because in the first sense, they were hurting themselves badly defensively. Because you look at what would mess up Portland when Lillard was there, it's like teams were going at him, and there was a defensive issue there, and they had to play to his tempo, his style. And he, of course, won some huge games because he's a ridiculously talented player. But that defensive element, I don't think that they rolled the dice on that. I'm not sure it was a great bet. And then not thinking of the move ahead for, okay, Portland, we're going to give them Drew Holiday. Is Portland going to keep Drew Holiday? They should have thought about that, because the answer was probably not. And then who would be up for Drew Holiday? And one of the big questions for Boston before that deal was, how would they do without Marcus Smart? And if you were able to replace Marcus Smart with a Drew Holiday, that, I'm stunned by how many teams have let Drew Holiday get away from their locker room, from their court, from their organization. The league and the Players Association have agreed to a rigorous drug testing program for players. I think it needs to extend to the front offices. This guy he made 2 huge plays yesterday down the end of the game, but you just watch him during a game, and I'm sure you probably have, and focus in on him, on the things he does that do not come anywhere near a stat sheet individually. Don't come anywhere near his stat line anyway, but they make it onto the sheet in a collective sense. They got a couple of guys like that. Derek White and Drew Holiday are just, if you're a basketball person, how can you not embrace these kind of guys and the stuff they do? I mean, they're like modern day Manu Ginobili's in some way,
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think that's where Milwaukee's problems are. What they can do now, pray that Chris Middleton comes back with some health, but they're going to have to be trying to outscore teams, and I'm not sure how that's going to go, because the Dame wants to play under a little more control. Giannis wants to get up and down the floor, and I think there's some trouble there. And when a team that has expectations, starts not living up to them, that's when issues come in. And there's no greater example in the NBA than the New York Jets.
Nice.
So,
yeah, I mean, you're around. You see them more. How do you feel about that? Are you seeing the same things, or do I need to be drug tested?
No, you're totally right there. I think there's been a lack of energy defensively, which certainly isn't being led or helped by Dame Lillard's own flaws as a defender. And then I think you hit the nail on the head with just the pace issue that they have even offensively, because Giannis excels with open space, getting out in transition, putting teams on their heels, and Dame likes to play a little slow pick and roll at the top of the key type work. And even on those pick and rolls, it doesn't seem like they've fully gelled as a 2-man combo in that pick and roll, where we thought as soon as the trade went down that'd be a serious problem for defenses. Well, hasn't seemed to be that effective thus far. And if it is, they're not running it enough, because even in the games that we've seen between the duos so far, I feel like it's not a huge focal point of the offense.
And the defensive issue for them as well. I mean, you could see it yesterday. The Celtics, especially down the stretch, were just getting like Tatum, I want to be guarded by Damian Lillard.
Mm-hmm.
They'd run that pick, and all of a sudden there's Lillard on him. And not only is there a better chance that Jason Tatum will score on Damian Lillard, but also when he makes his move, there's help coming, and there's like bingo to wide open shooters.
Yep.
So the other Bucks recognize the fact that they need to help out on whomever Lillard is guarding, particularly if it's after a switch that the Celtics have hunted. one of the things I think we all probably love about basketball, but how everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going back to something I was talking, the coach at my school, it's like a guy comes down into the front court with the ball, and he makes a move to the basket in transition. Now, one of his teammates has run hard to the right corner, sacrificial running. Another guy has come down the left wing and gotten leverage on the guy that was checking him coming down, and he seals his guy. The guy with the ball makes a move to the basket. The guy that's defending the guy in the corner can't come in fast enough because that guy has run to the deep corner, and other guy sealed somebody off. So the guy that's dribbling gets to 2 points. The other two guys don't get stats, but who made the play?
Exactly. Yep. It's a domino effect.
When you see teams, especially young teams and college teams, and even pro teams as well, when you see guys getting off the bench and celebrating that kind of stuff, that's when you've got a winning team. That's when you got a team that has an identity and has ownership within itself, even separate from the coaches. And that's, when you're playing for each other, that's when you win.
It was funny. After the game on Sunday, all of the Bucks guys were embracing Holiday out on the floor. It was, and I mean, Giannis said on this very show, the show that began his GM career, by the way, because on this very show, he's the one who said, I'll stay in Milwaukee as long as they're showing me they're trying to win. And that led to Dame, and Dame ended up going to Portland or from Portland, and that got Holiday to Boston. So, Giannis's GM career won Boston banner number 18. But that said,
you're waiting. He'll get his ring. He'll get his ring next trip in.
Yeah, nice.
Right. But okay, if the Bucks aren't the biggest disappointment so far in the NBA season, I would say Philadelphia is neck and neck with them for that distinction. They did pick up a nice win on Sunday against Charlotte at home. And, Paul George is back, but now Tyrese Maxey's out and Joel Embiid's been out. And, this team is missing its 2 stars. They are absolutely circling the drain when it comes to offense in the league this year. They're bad. We thought they might contend for a banner, but now they look like more of a contender for a flag. I mean, is this team as complete of a mess as they appear to be?
I think the key answer to your question is one word: November.
Yeah.
It's November. They've got some time to get their stuff together. And I really believe a lot in Tyrese Maxey. I believe, in not only his talent, but the way about his game. I believe in Joel Embiid's talent. So if he's on the floor and able to be, look, do they not get by the Knicks last year if Embiid is healthy? Right? I mean, they win that series, and the Knicks, the Knicks talk is probably dulled a bit. But so I believe in him. Paul George, I don't know, man. I know he's a good player. I got to see it more. It didn't work out in LA. The times that they had their guys healthy, it looked really good, but that's an issue. So I think that's a team that has it could give Boston trouble. Cleveland could, obviously. The Knicks could if it becomes a possession game. If the Celtics push tempo against the Knicks, I don't think the Knicks can win that series. So I think that's the way I look at the East. There's some teams I think are going to make some really good steps forward. I think Orlando. It's going to be really freaking fun to watch. And once they, again, I think they play hard on defense, but I think once they start seeing even more success, that they're going to lock in more defensively. And, but, teams look at the Bucks. We need to get another offensive talent to play with Giannis. When, heck, it was Holiday's defense that, that kind of puts you over the edge and the ability to make big plays. So, I think teams and front offices would be wiser to think more about the defensive stuff, because pretty much all these guys can score a bunch. They were all really big scorers when they had the ball in their hands a lot. So, I think that's an area that I would look to see which teams can make a move and challenge.
All right. So you mentioned Embiid. He hasn't even taken the floor yet. We've seen Steph Curry miss some games. Kawhi's missed most every game. In the last week, we've lost John Morant. We've lost Zion Williamson, Chet Holmgren. A couple weeks ago, Paolo Banchero. Now Kevin Durant, Scotty Barnes. Can all of these injuries to big marquee players, in your opinion, hurt NBA viewership to the point where the league consider something drastic moving forward, like adjusting the length of the season, or is the money too tied up in an 82-game schedule? And if that's the case, any thoughts on, that you have about dealing with so many injuries to these guys?
I think there's a long conversation that can be had with regard to that. Cutting down games, etc. But once everybody realizes that cutting back on the number of games will necessitate cutting back revenue, boom, conversation over.
Right.
It's the longest discussion leading to the quickest answer that kills the whole thing. So yeah, that's just the NBA exists as a business entity, and it's a factory. It creates product. So it needs product for the networks, for its deals. Those entities need product to put on their air, and that's what it is. That's what it's about. It's there are factories in the United States, and the NBA is the biggest, or one of the bigger ones in terms of revenue producers.
Hey, Steve, going back out west here, one of the teams we talked about, the Warriors, how they were, I don't know, surprised is the right word, but certainly their start has been impressive. But another team out west that has been under the microscope for over a year now has been the Phoenix Suns. They were such a disappointment last season. And this season they're on fire here. They had to adjust without Kevin Durant. But, how do you think can they hold it together during his absence? And what do you think about their chances in this Western Conference going forward?
I'd wonder about their defense too, overall, and especially when you get to a playoff situation. But the way I look at teams like that is, do they have the ability to make it a 2-minute game?
Yep.
And then do they have the players who can win a 2-minute game? So that's they have the proverbial puncher's chance. But I think defensively, that's something that's going to get in the way for them. Maybe they bring in somebody that helps with that, but it's going to take a concerted effort.
How much does Coach Bud being there improve that? You talk about defense. He's a defensive minded coach. How much of an impact does somebody like that can he have on a team like a veteran team like the Suns?
Well, we talked earlier about players needing to be judged in context. And I think, it goes for coaches as well. I guess we kind of did talk about that with JB Bickerstaff, but that's the case with Budenholzer. Ross might be well aware that that Mike's time in Milwaukee pretty much ended at the hands of, or it ended kind of during the players' exit interviews. Yep. That was, he was going to move on after that. They were going to move on from him after that. So, horses for courses. Sometimes it's important that a guy moves on. Maybe in the case of Budenholzer, I don't know exactly the dynamic that was happening within the dressing room, but his attention to defense, seemed to be pretty important for that team, and they were missing that. Whether he was the one driving that and providing it, or providing the blueprint for it, whatever. But he goes to Phoenix and he walks in the door, and the players go, "Okay, here's a guy that's won." He gets the ear of the players. Maybe the guys in Phoenix talk to the guys in the Bucks and decide, they're full of it. This guy's really good. But that's the dynamic we're looking at here. I mean, it happens all the time that, sometimes you just need someone else yelling at you or suggesting things to you, or, it's why half of the marriages in the country, don't work out. You need a new coach.
Well, speaking of marriages, there, I think that
really bad exit interviews there too, I'm sure.
Yes, that with the marriage thing there. I mean, I think the biggest thing was just a new voice in Milwaukee at the time, because one of the more surprising, coolest guests at Giannis's wedding was Coach Budenholzer. So I was happy to see there was no love or respect lost on the fact that he paid a major impact in Giannis's life and with those seasons in Milwaukee. So that was awesome to see.
Look, the vast number of Bruce's ex-girlfriends want to talk to him more now than before.
Nice. I love that. Well,
you can count them on one hand, that's for sure.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and wind down the show here with our final thoughts. And Bruce, I'll let you lead us off.
There's a brand new book out that just came out from The Athletic that I can't wait to crack open. It's called The Basketball 100, the story of the greatest players in NBA history. It's a monster. It's nearly 700 pages long. And two of my brothers from the Hoop family, David Aldridge and project coordinator Rob Peterson, who's one of the NBA editors at The Athletic, along with John Hollinger, are the driving forces behind the book. Besides the top 100 players, there's a chapter on how the shot clock saved the league and another on GOAT points, which makes the case for the rankings they've presented. Hollinger, as always, at its best when it comes to using data to back up his choices. So, folks, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, just weeks away, and the Hoop fan in your life will probably enjoy this book a lot. So the Basketball 100 from the staff of The Athletic is my recommendation.
Very nice, Bruce. World B?
Yeah, as everybody who listens to our show knows, I'm a Knicks fan first and foremost, and there would be nothing as a Knicks fan that I would enjoy more than seeing the Brooklyn Nets go 0-82. And this season, it was probable that the Brooklyn Nets fans were probably hoping for just such a season in order to secure a shot at number one projected pick in the draft, Cooper Flagg. But somebody forgot to tell the Nets players, because they're going out and playing their butts off so far this first couple of weeks, and they've really been impressive the way they've done it. It's been if you like watching the NBA, they're a fun team to watch because they compete every night. This past weekend, they had to go. The Boston Celtics had to go to overtime in Boston to beat the Nets. The Nuggets have had to go to overtime before they beat them, and the Cavaliers had to eke out a victory in the fourth quarter over this team. They bring it every night. I gave Cam Thomas a hard time before the season because he looked like nothing but a chucker, and so far he's proven me way wrong with the kind of player that he is. Dennis Schroeder is becoming a player. Cam Johnson is becoming a player. I mean, they're putting in an effort every night, and if the Knicks don't get it in gear in the next few weeks or whatever, you're going to start seeing attention paid to a team that gives an honest effort every night, and that's over there in Brooklyn.
Yeah, nice shout out there for the Brooklyn Nets. Steve, do you have anything for us here as a final thought? Anything on your mind?
Thank you for implying that I have a mind. Look, I've been looking at the year now and how the teams are kind of shaking out, and it is ridiculously early. In a normal year, I guess a few years ago, under this setup, I'd be thinking we were going to have a really wild trade deadline. But because of the play-in tournament, I think a lot more teams hang in with what they have. So I think we're going to miss out on what would be, you'd see a lot of teams up at the top thinking they're a player or so away and making some pretty crazy moves. So, maybe there's still a chance for that. But again, it's this time of the year, I just, would enjoy what you're seeing and looking for guys who are taking steps forward, like you're seeing with a Payton Prichard or any number of players on other teams. I would keep an eye on that stuff.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite aspects of the game is watching guys take the next step in either their sophomore season or beyond, like a guy like Buddy Hield that we talked about earlier there. So nice thought there, Steve. And as for me, last week we learned of some terrible news as my friend and former Knicks radio broadcaster Brendan Brown passed away at the young age of 54. I can tell you from experience that you truly learn who your real friends are in this business once you're out of a job. And Brendan was always one of those friends that was there for me. He was one of the people that encouraged me to pick up a microphone to continue showcasing my passion and knowledge for the NBA game. And as he did, moving on from NBA coaching staffs and into the Knicks radio booth. When we started this podcast, he became an immediate supporter of this show, always liking or sharing our promotional videos on his social media pages. And just last season, we were fortunate enough to have him join us on episode number 86, where he did an outstanding job breaking down the Pacers acquisition of Pascal Siakam. And I say this just to say that Brendan will be tremendously missed. And it'd be a complete understatement to say the basketball world lost a good guy and a good friend to a lot of people around the league. And I know I speak for all of us here at 48 Minutes that our thoughts and prayers go out to his wife, Kate, his daughter, and the rest of the Brown family during this very difficult time. And with that, I hate to bring this on a lighter note here, but Steve, we thank you for joining us.
If I have 1 second to support your point.
Yeah.
I started covering full time in the 85-86 season. And I've had opportunities at the Herald to be a general sports columnist. I said, I really like the NBA community. One of the benefits for covering so long is that you do meet a lot of people who become part of your life. One of the downsides is that time can be a bitch and things happen. And, you lose people. Bunch of writers, Jeff Denberg, Corky Meineke, Shelby Strother,
Sekou Smith.
Sekou, my God, no one cooler than Koo, whatever. And a whole bunch of people like that. And, players. And, I spent a bunch of time with Bob Cousy recently just to hang out. And it's like, but anyway, that's the downside. And that, it's like you're hanging around long enough, it's going to happen. Doesn't mean it hurts any less. Losing a Greg Ballard and Chocolate Thunder, I would miss getting that huge hug that he'd sweat through his suit and onto yours. Yeah, that's the hard thing. I guess I just want to say I'm really sorry for your loss, Ross.
I appreciate that, Steve. And yeah, it's been a tough week having to deal with this, but fortunate to have known such a special person. And I know that his memory lives on with a lot of people throughout the NBA. So with that will do it for this edition of the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe, presented by Bet Online. Thanks for tuning in. And a big thanks to Steve once again for joining us here tonight. Thank you, Steve. All right, take care.